Hello, it's Athena, and welcome to another episode of Unrestricted Live. I am super excited about today because we're going to be talking about how to get in flow with your flow. And corniness aside, we have an increasingly modern lifestyle. Many of us are becoming disconnected from our intuition and our bodies as we become more reliant on technology and fast-paced lives and pursuing our careers. We've been shamed around our periods. The media won't even show blood in commercials about products that are support something that we do for 30 years. And if we work, we can't show any signs of symptoms for fear of being held back or judged. So with all of this, it's no wonder we see our periods as an affliction and inconvenience, something we must hide and suppress. But for many of us, that means it can be painful, debilitating, and confusing the further disconnected that we get. So, what if we started tapping into this cycle and exploring its life giving process and energy? What if by paying more attention to and celebrating the process, we could get to a place where we celebrated and enjoyed it, even embraced it? So, my guest today's mission is just that. And I'm really excited to introduce you to someone who's on a mission to help all of us women become more connected with this life-giving energy and cycle that we have. Super excited to talk about this, and I'm so grateful that you came into my path at just the right times. So I know about you, but if you could, for those that are listening or watching, tell us what you do and a little bit about this line of work and how you got into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. My name is Laura, and I live in Southern Oregon on the west coast of the United States. And I am a menstrual empowerment and health educator. So I love to support people as they are building, cultivating healthy, nourishing relationships with their bodies, with their menstrual cycles, and with their blood. And I feel so blessed that I have the opportunity to do this in this life, that I get to share education around menstruation and fertility, bridging the sacred ancient teachings of menstruation with the modern scientific understanding that we have of the physiological aspects of the feminine hormonal cycle, and bridging the ancient and future together so that we can live embodied in this modern world while also pulling on the wisdom of our ancestors and the wisdom of these human bodies. So it's a
Yeah.
gift to be in this work, and I'm really excited to be here today and share a little bit about that.
It's so interesting because I think I definitely come from a like corporate, fast-paced, like just it happens, ignore it, and its sole function is to maybe provide me with a baby someday if I choose to want that. But there's so much more to it. So I'd love if you could give us a bit of insight as to why you think it's important for women to tap into their menstrual cycle and get to understand it better.
Yes. So I think that you said it so beautifully in the intro, Athena. You used the term life giving a couple times to describe the power that is available to us through our menstrual cycle. And I think that really hits the nail right on the head, that there is really so much energy and nourishment and power that is available to us through our menstrual cycles when we come to it with that level of intention or curiosity. When we are present with our wombs and present with our blood, there's so much there for us to uncover. And on average, people who menstruate spend 7 years of their life bleeding. So you may bleed over the course of a few decades, but the amount of hours literally spent menstruating culminates into 7 years of our life is
It's
spent menstruating.
crazy.
It is crazy. And why would we want to spend all that time disliking this aspect of our humanity if we can just reframe it and reapproach it with this different mindset and perspective, and instead love our cycles, look forward to our cycles, find safety and refuge within our cycles and within our bodies. So that's just the tip of the iceberg for what is available by tuning into our cycles in a more intentional way, and why it's important to start looking at it in that way.
And purely for the people that are just not really like into the whole spirituality or like getting into their stuff yet. Like this is a fairly new journey for me for going inward. Are there any like physiological or physical or, emotional benefits? Obviously, it's amazing to get in touch with this, but are there purely some rational arguments in getting in touch with your menstrual cycle as well?
Yes, that's a great question. And there are so many benefits. And I believe that it directly impacts all aspects of our life whenever we are connected with our menstrual cycle. And that's not just our period time when we're bleeding, it's our whole feminine hormonal cycle. And it's important to connect with all of those aspects of it because it's actually our barometer of overall health. So, our physical health, our emotional health, our mental health, our spiritual health. Our menstrual cycle is a direct reading for us, telling us what's going on with these bodies and aspects of our being. So, the pain that we experience or don't experience, the consistency and color of our blood, the length of our cycle, what our premenstrual time is like, what our ovulatory time is like, all of these symptoms have really deep information for us about what is going on in our lives. So perhaps
Mm-hmm.
it's letting us know that there's some sort of physiological imbalance, that there's something going on with our hormones or our physical body that's out of balance. Or perhaps our cramps are speaking to us about an emotional part of our life right now that we're processing and working through and releasing. And in terms of the specific physiological benefits, in order to have a healthy menstrual phase, you also need to have a healthy ovulatory phase. And when we have a successful ovulation, it is incredible for the health of our physical body. There are so many important things that happen during the ovulatory phase. There is improvements for our bone health, improvement for our brain health, improvement for our heart health. Every time we ovulate, we are literally adding time onto our lives and supercharging the power of our bodies. So when we have a successful ovulatory period, a couple weeks later, more or less, we are going to be able to have our healthy menstrual cycle. If we don't have healthy ovulation or anovulation occurs, especially chronically over a period of time, we might see imbalances arising in the blood. So there are many reasons for sure, physically, emotionally, and otherwise, why it is really beneficial for us to tap into this. And especially too, because hormonal birth control is huge in our culture. And that can be helpful for a lot of people. And that might be the right decision for a lot of people. But it also has a lot of really negative effects as well. And it's
Mm-hmm.
important to know that if you are working with hormonal medicine, it has a lot of challenges for the health of our ovulation and menstruation. So, just as a modern woman, as a modern person, knowing our bodies so that we can make that informed decision about what's best for them.
Yeah, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about all the years of hormones that I've been on or my friends have been on, like birth control related, and not realizing that there was benefits to the ovulation, which obviously the hormones that we take stop us from ovulating. That's the whole point. Super interesting. And I think the big thing that we're all realizing now is that we can't outsource like our own health to other people or other things like tracking apps for our health or calorie counters or cycle counters or whatever can help us keep track. But ultimately, like it's us needing to empower ourselves with really tuning into our body and knowing what's going on. And I think for me personally, the more that I've started taking that on myself and just like really seeing like what's going on with me, the more I'm able to ride the waves or know, okay, now I need some rest or whatever. And really interested to dive into this more because I've even heard that tracking your cycle, you can see when your productive times are and you can hack your cycle for productivity. So I'm like, yes, productivity queen right here. Like another way for me to that and even get more productive. So I don't know if you know anything about that, but I heard somebody mention it and I'm planning on looking into it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. There is a model that's called cycle syncing, and it is the practice of learning what's happening with our body physiologically and hormonally. And through that body literacy information and through tracking our cycle, like you said, we start to see how we feel during each of the different phases. There's 4 phases. So there's the menstrual phase, follicular, ovulatory, and luteal, which is the premenstrual phase. And
Hmm.
they each have a very distinct hormonal balance that changes the way that we feel, it changes the way that we communicate, it changes the way we have sex, it changes the way that we exercise, it changes the way we sleep. And so, through understanding what's happening neurochemically and seeing our personal patterns for how we feel week to week, we can actually start to build our lives around where we are in our menstrual cycle, doing the productivity time when that is what we are most jazzed for. That's what our body is already primed for. And when we need the rest time, when we need to go internal, when we need to have less social engagements, when we need to spend more time alone, we are creating that space for ourselves and we are working that space into our schedule. And this is what allows us to rest when we need to and to take action when we need to, when it's already what our body is naturally primed to do based on the intelligence of the feminine hormonal cycle. And it's central. It's so central to have the space to go within and then to have the space to go without, to have the space to rest and then have the space to go out and connect. And that natural rhythm and flow is so different than what the
Mm.
mainstream 9 to 5, 40 hours a week model prescribes for us. It wants us to be the same day after day. We're not. In fact,
Yeah.
our neurochemistry changes by 25% every week. And it's appropriate to adjust to those changes.
Yeah, no, I'm like, how have I not thought of this before? Because as far as my cycle goes, I'm like, okay, so 2 weeks out of the month, like I'm a cup size bigger, which is really painful and annoying. And then around when I ovulate, I'm a lot more interested in men around that time. So I'm like, clearly my body wants a baby, but beyond that, I don't really, know much about it. So this is clearly something I need to look into more, especially if it means I can like hack more productivity and get more out of myself, which I'm always looking for ways to do that and learning what times of day that I can work. This just makes complete sense. So I'm curious, you talk a lot about like the ancient practices and they were a lot more tapped into this, and there's something called the red tent. So tell us a bit about that and what the history around that is.
Yes. So, in every single culture that we have recorded history of, there is evidence of a menstrual tent. And the menstrual tent is a place where bleeding people in the village would come together to bleed and to circle up to be in ceremony. What these spaces looked like, as well as the practices and rituals that were carried out within these tents, it varies greatly dependent on where and when these structures were present. And the fact that all cultures had this, I believe, is one of the most unifying aspects of humanity. It is truly part of our roots. It's where all of our ancestral lineages meet, is in the menstrual tent. In the early 90s, the red tent was coined for the first time. And that was by Anita Diamant, who wrote a book that's called The Red Tent. And it's a historical fiction novel set in Old Testament times that talks a lot about what it might have been like for a woman living in the times where the menstrual tent was still present. However, this much more dominant, aggressive, patriarchal religion was starting to take over and demolish the goddess worshiping, earth worshiping culture. And Anita Diamant just totally wrote it as a novel. And what she wrote lit up a spark in the hearts and wombs of so many people This book became very well known. It was New York Times bestseller. It was like every book club read it. It became really mainstream, and it activated something in the collective consciousness. And people started saying, I remember this. I remember bleeding together. This feels right. I remember bleeding under the moon and circling up and supporting each other. And so at this time, there was already a huge feminist movement that had been carried out early 1900s with the women's suffrage, and then 60s and 70s women's rights becoming very relevant. And now in the 90s, hugely inspired by the red tent as well as other cultural influences, menstruation started really coming to the focus in some of these circles in a way that it previously hadn't. And people started circling up. People started creating spaces that they call the red tent, with the intention simply of coming together and sharing our stories. So what the red tent looks like now, it can be very different, again, dependent on where you are and who you're circling up with. Sometimes it's very ritualistic and it is focused around menstrual blood and offering our menstrual blood back to the earth. Sometimes it's much more casual and it's just ladies getting together and sharing food and sharing their stories. But regardless, what is held at the center is that place for sharing our truths and being witnessed in that, and just circling up with our sisters. So that's what the red tent looks like today.
Yeah, I had the experience. This is where you and I met, a women's circle of sharing our first experiences with bleeding. And I never made the connection between a very traumatic event in my life, which was also the same time that I started bleeding, and realizing like how much was wrapped in that. It was always like, oh, this really horrible thing happened. Oh, and I also became a woman at the same time, never realizing like how that might be intertwined, and continue to every month, I think, just like reignite that trauma within me. So I was able to share that with a group of women and release it and almost like reset. And it's been maybe 4 months, I think, since. And just the gift that my cycle gives me now of that renewed, like taking back power in that moment. And I think it's a really powerful thing. I'm a baby novice at all of this kind of spiritual stuff, but like the more I experience, the more I think it's really exciting. So for women like me that are just maybe a little bit interested in this and are interested in getting in touch with their cycles or learning more about it, what are some things that women can start doing, like at a basic level, maybe to start exploring this space themselves, their cycles?
Yes. I would say tracking is a really great place to start because it brings a daily practice into the connection with your cycle. So there are all kinds of tracking journals that you can buy if you want to have one that's pre-made and has some symptoms already filled there that you can work in day to day. Or if you're the type of person that wants to create something yourself, I've seen some really beautiful bullet journal designed tracking for people who with creative minds that like to create their own visuals in that way. It can look any number of ways, but essentially the practice is just coming to your body daily and writing down how you felt physically, how you felt emotionally, how was your communication, just noticing the general themes in your energy for that day. Maybe you want to track things like when you exercise, what types of food you eat, how you were feeling emotionally. Of course, if you had any symptoms like cramps or achiness or sore breasts or acne. We're really tracking all of our bodies, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And every day, we're just starting to write down how we feel. Now, over time, this tracking is going to allow us to see the greater patterns that are present in our cycle. So the tracking is a really great way to start dropping in and paying closer attention to your body and to your womb and what's going on. Another way that I think is really great to start connecting with your blood, if you feel comfortable with it, is to experiment with using a menstrual cup. And this, when I first started, was transformative for me because for the first time, I could see the volume of my blood. I could see how much I was really bleeding. And I was like, this is a lot. This is a lot of blood coming out of me every month. And I feel power, and that there's a lot of blood every month, and I don't die. I get stronger, I get clearer, I get more centered, I get more confident. So seeing the volume of the blood was transformative for me, and then having it there in the menstrual cup, so then I can do whatever I choose with it. I can give it to the earth if I choose, I can use it to paint with if I choose, I can anoint myself somewhere on my body that it's calling for. And that might be getting a little bit out there for a novice, but there are different levels of the way that we can start to drop in with it. It's also a very personal practice, so it's all about finding what works for you. A lot of people don't find menstrual cups comfortable in their body. So
Mm-hmm.
there's other options for free bleeding into period panties or onto a towel that you use specifically for your menstrual time. Another way would be, if you have the access and the privilege, to just try and take a day off for your blood if you can. Maybe it's a day or two before your moon starts, or maybe it's the first day of your blood, but just taking a moment, if you can, to be present with your womb is really powerful, and I think is a way that we can begin to honor that time that is really meant to be for ourselves.
Yeah, I'll share my personal story, which you know about, off the back of that circle with the women. And I realized there was all this trauma wrapped up in my cycle, and I wasn't yet using a cup. And I'm traveling the world. I am very big on reducing waste, reducing my personal waste as much as possible, but I was still using tampons. And it was just like that. I don't want to say peer pressure, but the tipping point for me was like, I'm the only one in my friend group, like, not using a cup right now. Okay, like, this is something I can explore. And maybe it's a way for me to just have a new relationship with it if I'm doing something different than I've always done. But also, I have a skin condition which has no known cure. It's very debilitating if it gets out of hand. And it's basically like a tunneling boil system that just goes totally crazy. And you shared that blood has a lot of stem cells in it and can heal skin conditions. So I was like, oh my God, my rational brain starts kicking in, and I'm just like desperate to try to get the skin condition under control. And this has stem cells, and I know people are paying like tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for stem cell treatment. So I'm like desperate at this point. So I'm like, I'm getting a cup and I'm seeing if my blood can take care of the skin condition. And oh my God, it was almost out of control when I met you guys, and it's been 4 months and it's under control. It's gone. And I think there's 1% of the population that have this skin condition, but it's just transformed my whole relationship. Of course, this part of my body grows life. Like, why wouldn't these things, this process, have some sort of healing or transformative power? It's a bit much. Like, the girls, like my friend group, they were painting with their blood, and I don't know about that, but like after I started getting my skin condition under control, I'm like, I'm doing a face mask with this. I'm not afraid to share that now, because I was in tears over this skin condition that I thought, there's people that go off on disability because it gets that bad if it doesn't get under control. And here I had the solution inside me this whole time. That's my personal testament to like, this is something to look into for all of us.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I similarly, it's when you have the real life experience of how powerful this really is as medicine, of how our blood and our bodies literally can heal even the seemingly untreatable things that arise. And it was all right here. So when we have those experiences, you can't deny it, and you want to spread it with people, because we are not taught this. We are taught the opposite, that our blood is
Mm-hmm.
dirty, that it's shameful, and it couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, and I'd seen a doctor here, and before this point, and he gave me steroids, which messed with me like even more. So I was like trying to fix something, but then messing up my whole body, when actually I just needed my own body to heal itself. And I definitely want to keep talking about this because I know so many people are like afflicted with this condition. So at least women can start experimenting and seeing if I was just like, maybe it was a placebo effect and I just believed in the healing power of it, or maybe it actually did, but I don't know. So I think it's really important. I guess on that note, tell us a little bit more about what our blood is made of and like what uses that it can have. You mentioned a few already, but tell us a bit more about it.
Great. So, our menstrual blood is our endometrium lining that is being prepared within the uterus to sustain a potential embryo. So, our body is preparing all cycle to get us pregnant, and our uterus is concerned with making the most protective, nourishing environment for a potential life inside of it. So, our uterine lining is thickening. It's actually only about 8 to 11% blood. So we call it blood, but it may not be the most accurate word. It's very different than the blood in the rest of our body. It's only 8 to 11% blood. The
Wow.
rest of it, there's a lot of stem cells, there's a lot of immunity cells, there's a lot of fats and proteins, there's all kinds of nutrients and minerals and all the things that would be really important to sustain that embryo within the womb. So when we don't conceive and we get our period instead, that lining is released out of the uterus, through the cervix, through the vagina, and comes out of our body in the form of our menses, our menstrual blood. It still has all of that juicy nourishment. There are no toxins within the menstrual blood, because why would our body send toxins to this area of our womb that is literally preparing to contain life within it? There are no toxins in menstrual blood. It's a big taboo that we're moving through collectively. Now, the blood can develop pathogens outside of the body if it's kept at room temperature or warmer for more than a couple hours. So what I really suggest, if you're not going to use the blood immediately, just keep it in the freezer, and that will keep it from developing any pathogens. There are many ways that we can work with our menstrual blood. The one is to offer it to the earth or offer it to your houseplants. If you're going to do that, just make sure you dilute it with water, and that's going to allow the blood to really efficiently soak into the soil instead of just sitting on the surface, because again, it can get funky if it's just sitting out. So we really want that to absorb down into the soil with the water. So you can do a little test at your home with your houseplants or out in your garden. Start feeding your diluted menstrual blood to one of your plants and keep feeding just plain water to the other, and just see what happens. Plants love it. Love it, love it, love it. It is amazing fertilizer for our plants. Also, it holds incredible manifestation abilities. So there's a lot for us to tap into there when we give our blood back to the earth consciously with prayers and intentions for ourselves and also the entire global collective. There's so much magic that can happen in that realm. Painting with blood, similarly amazing for manifestation. Also really great because it activates the left and right hemispheres of the brain, which is already happening during menstruation. That's when we have the greatest amount of brain functioning between the left and the right hemispheres, the most in-depth communication happening between them. You can save your menstrual blood for all different kinds of magical workings, and you can do that by painting it, allowing it to dry, and then scraping it off and keeping it in an airtight container. And you might use that in spells or in protection grids or in other pieces of ritual art, perhaps. You described using the menstrual blood on your face as a face mask. That's an excellent way to use the blood. You can use it on any part of your body that there are imbalances, cold sores, acne, bug bites, sunburn, poison oak. I recently treated a really bad case of poison oak, and my menstrual blood worked tremendously, unlike anything else that I've ever used in my life. Absolutely fantastic. And again, the stem cells, it's even if you don't have something out of balance, you can put it on your face just as a face mask. And when you rinse it off, you're going to feel vibrant and your skin feels juicy and plump. It's amazing.
It was like my pores just got smaller and my skin was like, woo, like it's crazy. It's definitely, if had I not known about the stem cell thing, I think I would have been like, this is crazy. But I have people very close to me that have paid a lot of money for stem cells. So the Capricorn in me is like, how much money are we throwing down the toilet every month? This is crazy.
Yes, yes, totally. And the other amazing thing about it is that there are stem cells. Like, this is medicine that our body is creating for us. And it
Hmm.
knows exactly what imbalances are present in the body and how to respond to them intelligently. So not only do we not have to pay a ridiculous amount of money for someone stem cells, but again, it's that self-resourced thing that's happening where we're able to take our health into our own hands.
Yeah, like it's crazy. I'm excited about it. If nothing else, just to get something under control that I felt completely out of control about. But if I can try to get some nice skin while I'm at it as well, like that's always a bonus. So I'm curious, there's another practice that a lot of people have talked about, and it's another one of those things that it's like, oh, at first, but yoni steaming. I've heard so many people talk about this and we talked about it. So just can you tell us what yoni steaming is? Maybe tell us what a yoni is for those that don't even know the terminology, and like why would you do something like this?
Cool. Thank you. So, yoni is Sanskrit for vagina, but it doesn't translate quite perfectly. Vagina is a medical term that describes our physical anatomy, or this one piece of our physical anatomy. Yoni is a little bit more all encompassing of the spiritual and the physical, and it represents the divine gateway, the holy portal, and in a greater essence, the divine feminine. So many people choose to use the word yoni because it feels like a much more empowering way to connect with that part of their
Mm.
body. So, yoni steaming, it's also sometimes called pelvic steaming, and it is the practice of taking medicinal herbs and steaming them with warm water, and then putting that herbal steam below your yoni, using perhaps either a long skirt or wrapping your waist with a heavy blanket. They also make little seated setups for the yoni steam. However you do it, you are going to have the steam from these herbs coming up into your pelvic floor, up into your yoni. And there are so many phenomenal benefits that are available through yoni steaming. People treat all kinds of menstrual disturbances, hormonal imbalances, ovarian cysts, infertility, cramps, late periods, all kinds of symptoms associated with the cycle. People are successfully treating with yoni steaming, in addition to other holistic modalities, of course, because anything with the yoni or womb or anything menstruation, if we want to fix an imbalance, we have to focus on it holistically. We have to approach it holistically. So, with the yoni steaming, the herbs, the flowers, and the plants that we choose to steam, we choose those based off of why are we yoni steaming? Is there a specific imbalance or symptom that we are trying to alleviate through this practice, or are we just doing it for overall juiciness and yoni lubrication? And then we choose the herbs in correlation with what they are able to assist our bodies with. So, for example, if we have a really late period and we're wanting to help bring our blood on, we are going to choose herbs that are amenagogues, and that amenagogues help to stimulate menstrual blood flow. So maybe we would steam with parsley or mugwort or rosemary are some examples of gentle amenagogues.
It's so interesting, this whole world, and this has been an absolutely fascinating, just tip of the iceberg chat with you about all these ways we can explore our own bodies as women. So this is what you do, and this is what you are passionate about. So where can people find more information about you, and where can they find you? Because I think you're online and offline. Tell us a bit more.
Yes, thank you so much. My website is priestessingtheparadigmshift.com. And that's also my Instagram handle. And that is my womb centric business that I birthed. That's how I bring my offerings to the world. So I offer both group and one on one trainings in sacred menstruation and red tent facilitation. And I typically offer events in person and bring practical red tent bleeding spaces to festivals and events. That's all on hold right now due to the pandemic, but that's definitely going to continue at some point in the future. So yeah, please reach out and connect with me. I'd love to answer any questions or just hear how this all lands for you.
Absolutely. Follow Laura. She's got so much like good information in there. And as having worked at festivals and gone to many festivals, like I think there should be a red tent at every single one. It's barbaric when you're a woman and you're just like praying that you're not going to be bleeding when you go. So I think it's amazing work that you do. Before we wrap up, I have one final question that I ask all of my guests. It's a little blindsided, but I'm sure you'll have a beautiful answer for it. So I like to find out how you would define living unrestricted.
For me, living unrestricted means to live in line with the natural rhythm of my body and to allow my presence to be informed by the innate wisdom of my body and to do the absolute best I can every day to disengage from the productivity mindset that I have previously been conditioned into in order to live in feminine overflow and embodiment.
Yeah, I love that. There's something so beautiful in tapping into ourselves and finding, I think there's a new evolution of productivity coming up, and it's a much more like spiritual connected one in that I don't need to be doing work all the time. Like actually what's important is for me to live my life and be embodied and be intuitive and just more connected. So I resonate with that.
Yes, I know that you are doing that work right now, for sure.
The rat race is no fun. The matrix is not, it's making us sicker. So there's got to be a middle ground, right? There's got to be a way that we can be doing our best work like you are with this and find a place that we're happy and we're taking care of ourselves, but still feeling like we're productive and showing up in the world as we want rather than by someone else's definition. That can be a very difficult and tumultuous process for myself, especially like this. We're just indoctrinated with this way that we need to be living. And one of those ways is just being completely separate from this thing that we do 7 years of our life, you know?
Yes. I completely feel you. Yes.
This was super amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, and make sure to check Laura's content out on her website and Instagram, which is Priestessing the Paradigm Shift. Lots and lots to learn there. And I'll also be linking to those places in the descriptions below this video, or if you're listening on the podcast. So make sure to check her out and give her some love, and also give yourself some love. Tap into that amazingness that we have inside of ourselves. So thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you, Athena. Thank you for holding the space and inviting me into it. I'm so grateful.
I'm grateful to have you here. We'll see you soon.